Whether you're coming to the end of your educational training, have already done all of the hard work necessary to complete your program, we all inevitably find ourselves on the cusp of another daunting task, landing a job. This can be either an extremely stressful or frustrating process, maybe even both, but you will likely need every bit of support along the way. In this episode, we will share some beginner and intermediate tips for finding your next opportunity in public health or global health.
This is the Public Health Insight Podcast.
My name is Ben, your host for this episode, and I am here with co-hosts Gordon, LaShawn, and Linda.
Before we move on, it is important to note that the views expressed in this podcast are our own and do not represent any of the organizations we work for or are affiliated with.
So everyone, job searching and application process. What is your experience with that? And can you share any insights into this?
Yeah, it's a difficult process. From my experience, it was a painful process, and I don't want to do it again.
The end.
But at the same time, when it's your first instance, out of school, trying to find your professional grown-up job, I think it's understandable that it's hard. And hopefully in future it becomes easier.
It's almost like there's a different anxiety with starting your career as opposed to finding a job in high school or undergrad, like a job versus a career. And I think finding your first job to get you started along your path in your career can be a very difficult process. I agree with that.
And when you're reading job descriptions, it's so daunting because often they're saying, we want someone with 5 to 7 years of experience, but you're like, I know how to do these things. I can do it, but I just got out of school. And so there's that pressure of you're qualified, but you're a baby in the field.
Yeah, and then the other aspect of that is with these applications, you'll see, okay, what's the job description? What are the tasks that I'm responsible for? They'll list literally 15 separate items. And then you're like, okay, that's a bit hectic. And
it says not limited to.
Exactly, not limited to. And then the other point is that they won't give you an actual salary. So you can kind of see, hey, is this amount of work worth the amount of pay that they're giving? And then two is that you often, it's such a vague point that when you get to an interview point and you got to negotiate that factor, you're already in the dark. You don't have an anchor point to kind of negotiate. Sure. So it's tough. There's a lot ahead of you that you need to be prepared for.
So I would say the first step in finding a job before you even start getting overwhelmed by postings is, as much as possible, find someone who's already doing that work and talk to them. Just to get a reference point of where to start from.
I guess when we're talking about, job searching in general, what does that actually mean, right? You hear terms tossed around like job seeking, job hunting, and job searching. What does that actually mean?
Yeah, I think it just comes down to what are your tools, techniques, and strategies that you use to ultimately find a job, right? And everyone's approach is different, but, overall, they're a set of tried and tested tools that everyone can implement into their strategy to become better job searcher or job hunter. And one of the things that's important to get out of the way too is, how transferable is a job search strategy from one field to the next? Is there a difference of how you would look for a public health job compared to a different job in a different field like nursing? For example, if you're looking for a nursing job, you may Google nursing jobs. In public health, do you just Google public health jobs, or is there a better way to do it?
Yeah, our area is so broad in what a master of public health can do. So, you can be involved in community engagement within an organization, or you could be a researcher. So it can literally take you anywhere that you want to, which is what is nice about public health and global health. But at the same time, it depends on where you're at in your life. Are you just trying to find a job so you can get money and then you're just going all over the place? Or like Linda mentioned earlier, are you looking for a specific career path? So we have to take that into account.
Yeah. The way I look at it is, you have all these skills that you gain through, informal or formal education. And now you're kind of having to make that decision. Which area do you want to apply these skills into? And I consider that called the application area of where you're interested in. So for example, most of the listeners on this podcast would probably be interested in more public health, global health. And to answer, your question, Gordon, of, are there different strategies within searching, for example, between public health and global health, compared to other jobs like, construction, becoming an electrician? I think it's a good start to get familiar with the terminologies and the different concepts within that field. So you kind of have that baseline understanding of what you're getting into. Because if the first thing you do is, search these different job descriptions and you see all these words you're unfamiliar with, it adds to that stressful nature of this whole job strategy or job searching process.
And most job titles do not say public health in the job title itself or global health. So if you're only, trying to skim a list for jobs that say public health, you're going to feel stuck. So the terminology is definitely a good place to start as well.
Yeah, the devil's in the details, right?
So like one thing you mentioned, Linda, is identifying people who are working in areas that you might have some interest in, or that's your previous experience and you want to pick back up where you left off. But before you even get there, you have to know what are some ideal career opportunities out there for you. And it starts with, searching. One of the first things I did when I was looking into getting into the Western MPH program is I emailed Lisa, can you give me some examples of careers that people go on to do when they complete an MPH? Because if you go to school to become a doctor, you look for doctor jobs. You go to electrician, you look for electrician jobs, nursing jobs. But public health jobs, that search term is a little bit too vague and broad, and it might not capture a lot of those specific careers within the public health field that are maybe the most non-traditional public health careers that might not be captured in those search terms. So what I do in my process is I build a database of job titles that are in line with what I want to be doing, whether it's knowledge translation specialist, health promoter, all these different titles, and then I search specifically for those job titles instead of just searching public health jobs in Ontario.
So to clarify, Lisa was the career counselor in our program.
Shout out to Lisa.
But are you saying that you asked her this before you accepted your offer to the program?
Yeah, I was just confused. I'm like, okay, because even I think
before the program.
Before the program, yeah. When I got accepted.
Everyone's hectic.
Yeah, I was on a mission to do stuff. So, but like for one thing I was finding is, and you guys have it too. You have the question, hey, what is public health? Before you got an MPH, your answer was probably very choppy. And then two, people in my family, people I know, oh, so what are you gonna do after? I'm like, okay, work in public health, but what does that mean? Like, I'm a accountant, and what do you do? Just you're a public health job guy? Like, and I'm like, that's a good question. I don't know what's out there. And then when you look into it further, you see things like epidemiology and stuff like that, those very niche areas in public health. And then that's kind of where you need to be looking. That's where you'll find the information you want in terms of specific jobs. Public health is just too broad of a term when you're searching.
So there has to be this precursor, like research phase into even what is public health in the job atmosphere and where do you want to see yourself before you even move on to anything else.
Yeah, and as a follow-up to that, during my practicum, when I was crazy job searching, I circled back with Lisa. Lisa literally sent me because our career development coordinator essentially sends us job postings frequently, and she has a pretty big database of job titles stored up. So she sent me like an Excel sheet of the last 5 years of all the job titles, and that's what I used to search. I'm like, oh, what is project officer? I'm like, what is that? And you kind of look, project officer in public health. Oh, okay, this looks cool. And then you kind of identify your interests that way and then search specifically for those jobs.
Yeah, and I agree with Ben when he says there's a lot of research. And I think throughout this whole process, there's a lot of research and digging into, different organizations, different backgrounds of the different career opportunities that are available. But for myself at least, the way I break it down is, I first kind of have like this little reflection period, or I call it a self-reflect or self-assessment period. It's like really understanding what you want. Like what is the purpose of this? What are you trying to do? What are your end goals? What are some of these outcomes? Something that you can work towards. So you don't necessarily have to have a clear idea of that, and maybe you don't even know that, but just, kind of understand what you want to get out of a certain job, whether it's the type of field that you're trying to go into. And to do this, what I usually do is I just use Google, right? You just type in, public health job titles like Gordon may have mentioned, or type in different careers in public health, and you'll get a broad list. Once you get that list, you could type in those keywords and phrases into Google and it'll generate more leads. So that's one of the things I do initially, is kind of my environmental scan of what I want to do. And then knowing this and kind of getting a better idea of what's out there, then I go through this phase called, okay, what are some of the barriers and obstacles that I have to face at some point? And this is kind of understanding, okay, do I need a certain degree? Do I need a certain certification? Do I need to pass a certain exam? Do I have, not even those formal things, but also more personal attributes like, am I willing to take a job in a certain geographic location? Do I have family considerations that I have to make? Is this realistic for me to do? So that's some other kind of steps that I take. And then once you kind of do these two first steps, it kind of allows the rest of the process to flow more smoothly because you have that understanding. So you could tailor the rest of your search process based on, these criterias and obstacles that you've already identified, and a more narrow understanding of the field you want to go into.
It's a great point.
Essentially, you're saying start with knowing yourself first. What are your deal breakers? What is
it
going to
helps.
motivate
It's one of the
you?
ways, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, like a deal breaker for me is commuting. Hate it.
Exactly.
As part of that self-assessment or self-reflection, a good thing to do as well is to have like an experience database. It's kind of like a rough resume where you just dump. You brainstorm all the stuff you've done in the different roles you've had, and then that's a repository that you're going to use to build your actual tailored resume for the positions that you're applying for. And that's very effective. I think if you have to do that exercise every single time you're applying for a job, that's where the exhaustion comes in. So you have to just, before you even start job searching, just like, I'm going to sit down, do like a timeline of when I've been working, whether it's formal or informal through volunteer up until now. And then under each of those experiences, you want to write down any kind of thing that you did. That way you can, transfer that over to your tailored resume and then tweak it in a way that speaks to the position that you're applying for.
Absolutely.
And even for your own self-assessment, when you make that sort of rough resume, you can see, what did I like about this position? What did I dislike? So
dislike, that's key.
If that's an area you want to pursue further, or if you're just going to stay away from that. So, for example, if you've worked in a lab before, a lot of bench work, and you hated that, then most likely you're not going to look for those jobs again. Or if you worked in the community and you hated that, then you probably will steer in a different direction. So it's helpful.
Both are equally useful for sure, knowing what you dislike.
Yeah, I'd honestly say the dislikes are kind of a stronger factor. No? Because it can make it or break it.
It's easier to know what you don't like. Yeah.
That will focus your search a little bit more too. I'm not really interested in research, but I'm open to exploring other things. So so it's almost like what you're saying, Ben. Maybe have an exclusion criteria. You mentioned commuting.
Yeah.
Maybe some people, like LaShawn said, have commitments and they're kind of restricted to their geographic region that they're in. They're not able to move around. Some people can move anywhere in the world because they're able to, because of situation, and they're adventurous. So you have to identify those parameters that work best for you and then focus your job searching there.
And another parameter just to add to the mix is, do you want to work virtually or do you want to work in person? And these are some of the choices that we're faced with. Like, if you're doing infectious disease and control in a hospital, you probably have to go inside. Whereas if you're working on different protocols or policies, maybe that's something you could do online in a virtual environment. So those are also part of that criteria and obstacle phase.
A lot of the job search now is virtual, and maybe in the past, in a pre-COVID era, you could potentially go into a facility, and say, I'm interested in this role, and just do like an on-the-spot type of research for yourself. But it is online now for the most part. You can't just go into anywhere and see if they're hiring. And so this may not be completely applicable to public health, but I know I've had friends in nursing, for example, who just went to the hospital and said, can I speak to the unit manager? And said, hi, I'm looking for a job. And then they spoke with them. And after that, it led to an opportunity. Whereas now, we can't really do that. So,
Yeah, and the same way is key, because I think even though we have COVID-19 and the pandemic going, which prevents a lot of, those physical site visitations or a way to extract information in that sense, there's also a lot of opportunities that arise that we can take advantage of.
absolutely.
You've just heard from Ben, Linda, Gordon, and LaShawn about how they prepare for the daunting process of job searching. You don't want to miss out on the next episode, where they do a deeper dive and share some tips you can use to find your next job and career opportunity in public health or global health. Thank you for listening to the Public Health Insight Podcast, your go-to space for informative conversations, inspiring community action. If you enjoy our content and would like to stay up to date, follow us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. To learn more about our community initiatives and how you can support us, visit our website at thepublichealthinsight.com. Join the PHI community, and let's make public health viral.